So what we're going to do in this video now is we're going to break down the wrist angles and how they should be working if you want to develop a little bit more shaft lean and get rid of, obviously, that early release pattern. The number one reason why golfers are early releasing is because of an open club face. Now, I have gone over in another series the benefits of better wrist angles and how they can help you get those club face conditions under control if you're someone who struggles with an open pattern. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to explain a little bit more in detail both hands, how they work in the golf swing when you are developing more shaft lean. What do I mean by shaft lean? I mean when we are getting into a position at impact where the hands are ahead of the club head, and it's basically the exact opposite of an early release where the club head overtakes the hands in an effort to square the face. We're going to talk about lowering our dynamic loft. So dynamic loft is your loft at impact. We're going to try to get that a little more under control, and we're going to try to get more shaft lean. We're going to go over how the wrist should be working in an effort to get there. So really both hands actually come into play in this video. It's not just a question of obviously what the lead wrist is doing. Both hands play a big role in what forces we're going to apply to the shaft throughout the golf swing. When we have shaft lean, okay, when we start to get rid of an early release pattern, it's important to remember one thing, okay? This is obviously assuming that you've gotten the club face under control by this point through the other series where I explain how to do it. Once you get that club face dialed in, it's very possible where you might be early releasing still. Now, I'm going to give you some awareness into what might happen if you're doing that, okay? If you are somebody who had an open club face in the golf swing and you started to early release, now we just went over this, obviously this is a way to square the face up. Well, the number one thing you got to do, and this is based on cause and effect, is you need to get rid of the open club face because that is the reason you're early releasing in the first place. It is very possible, and I see this quite often, where a golfer gets rid of the open club face. So they actually improve their grip, their wrist angles, all this stuff, and they got the club face into a better spot, but their body still adapts late in the swing as if the club face is open and they still early release. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that getting rid of the open club face does not guarantee that you will stop early releasing. What it does is it gives you the tools to learn how to stop early releasing because you got rid of the root cause of the issue in the first place. This is very important to understand. And so when I said that I see a lot of golfers struggling with this, this is why. If you have an open club face in the downswing and you are early releasing to square it up, right? That gets you, obviously, the club face dialed in. Well, you're developing an early release, a bunch of problems. If you get the club face now under control, but your body still early releases, what is going to happen to the club face at impact? It is going to be so far closed that you are going to hit big pulls, big pull hooks, and you're going to miss very inward more often than not. So for a right-handed golfer like myself, that is hard to the left. Now, this is exactly why golfers struggle to continue working on it, because if you don't necessarily understand what is happening when you have an early release, well, you take a golfer who goes to their driving range and doesn't have this awareness or understanding. If they have an open club face and they're early releasing and all of a sudden they say, okay, well, my face is open, I got to square it up, but their body hasn't adapted to the new club face conditions and they continue to early release, well, they're going to hit snap hooks off the planet. So that golfer is going to say, why the fuck am I making this adjustment? Why don't I just keep it where I'm able to hit the ball straight? Well, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to continue to struggle with the same issues. So you're not getting into that next level, that next tier of improvement. So if you want to get rid of those bad habits, you're going to have to go through a little phase where you might actually have better club face conditions, but if you're still early releasing, you might hit pull hooks. This does not mean it's a bad thing. All it means is that you are going to start developing better conditions in your swing to get rid of that poor environment where you were early releasing. So what I want to do is break down those wrist angles. When you early release, okay, what we tend to see is that the trail hand is going to start to move this way. So what that means is we are going from a position of extension in the trail hand to a position of flexion. So flexion again meaning that the hand is curled underneath the forearm. Well, when I early release, I'm going from a position like this where I have clearly extension in my trail hand and I start early releasing. You are seeing that I am going into a more flexed position on the trail hand. What does that mean? It means I'm early releasing. So what you need to start thinking about is the idea that the trail hand, once you get the club face under control, needs to retain that extension through the ball. If I'm going to stand here, and I'm going to give you this visual, when I get shaft lean, take a look at what happens to my trail hand. It is getting into more of a extended or cupped position. So if I am going into more of a flexed position on the trail hand before I hit the golf ball, I am likely still early releasing. So think about the role of the trail hand. It is just as important as the lead wrist. We already know that the lead wrist wants to get bowed because when I press the handle forward, I am developing flexion on the lead wrist. That allows me to get that shaft lean. But the trail wrist is equally important because it is also applying a force. If we start to get into a position where I am losing this extension and it is getting into this position here, I'm early releasing. So the role of both hands are equally important. Once you get that club face under control, you need to get into flexion with the lead wrist and you need to get into extension with the trail wrist like this. All of a sudden you'll be able to develop a little bit more shaft lean.